I'm sending you the worst movie I know. It's called Riding with Death, and it sucks on toes. Hang on, Bobo. Hang on.
Oh, darling, what happened?
I am so hungry. I haven't eaten since lunch. Anybody got a knish?
Hungry? Why, you stupid monkey?
This time we watched Season 8, Episode 14, Riding with Death.
Riding with Death sounds to me more like we're riding with Beth today.
I was wondering why you wanted me to go first.
Well, it's your turn to be frank.
Yeah, that's true. Didn't want that bomb-o to go waste.
It's good to have you back, Beth. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I have been trying to come up with trucker names for myself.
Uh-huh. What you got?
Nothing. I got one for you, though.
Oh, dear. What's that?
Count Basie.
Count Basie? Okay. Like a Count Basie reference, but because I got an ass.
Oh, because of your cat.
Oh, because of my cat Basky. Right.
Yes,
okay.
Count Basie.
Oh, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to call you. Highway Mama? I don't know.
Not Highway Mama.
Okay. Well, I gave you a chance first, but until you come up with something else, I'm afraid it's Highway Mama.
Okay, fair enough.
We got a lot of follow-up to talk about because quite a lot of things have happened since we took a month off right when they started a new season, huh?
Yeah, there has been so much going on, and Gizmoplex was kind of a beautiful disaster.
Yes, so they did a soft launch for the new season for people who were Kickstarter backers, and it had a few technical difficulties, let's say.
And it was so funny because they were like, I don't know what the system is, but apparently like they were watching it and able to respond on it. So they were just saying, we swear we checked this before. We did a beta run. We swear everything's okay.
It was very sweet, frankly. We'll talk about the episode soon enough. Maybe even next episode, no spoilers. But until then, it was tremendous technical difficulties, but they eventually showed the movie. Some people had trouble with the sound.
That was me. I could not hear the movie at all. It was quiet.
Yeah, so I didn't have any problems with that. But since then, they've run a short just the other night. And I actually was watching that on a different device, and I had a problem with the sound of the movie in the short, which was very quiet, I thought. Like, I could hear it, but it was real quiet.
Yeah, I was running it on my laptop. I wonder if I had it through my TV speakers, it would have been a little bit better, but it had, or if I had been listening to it in my headphones, maybe it would have been better, but it was, I gave up. It was just like, I can't hear the movie. There's no point in watching this.
Yeah, they sent out a little note for people who had that problem to do some further beta testing for them. Hopefully they'll figure it all out. I don't know what the problem with that is. They also had the breakout star of the white dot that appeared for 15 minutes at the beginning when nothing seemed to be working right. And the white dot has become canon, apparently.
Oh, yeah?
They had a brief glimpse of him during the Shorts night and the Manos live event that they just had. They're doing so much. It's hard to keep up. I watched a little bit of the short. I watched the Manos live event. Well, I watched the beginning of it. We watched Manos a lot this year with our big episode on Manos and the Mads doing Manos.
Yeah.
And then watching Manos Unriffed for that. I've kind of had enough Manos for a few months. I did not rewatch this episode just now.
You can tell nobody owns that movie anymore.
Yeah, well, and they also had Jackie on as a special guest, which was very nice. Jackie, the woman who has a girl, played Debbie in the movie. So... and everybody says that was very sweet. I'll go back and watch that at some point. But
Jackie's always game. She's awesome for stuff like that.
Yeah. And the Mads have been doing stuff. And Mary Jo's been doing some great stuff on her channel. And she's been in a lot of these Gizmoplex airings as well. So that's been nice. And they're doing a real good job making Mary Jo as Pearl look so much like Cynthia.
Oh, really?
The costume and makeup departments are just doing an absolutely gangbusters job, making the two of them look straight on related. It's been a lot of stuff. And I will say, short thing, 1301, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
They calmed down from a lot of the Netflix stuff. So it didn't feel like it was, hyper riffing at the speed of light. It felt like they were all in a room together. It felt very ambient. There were some sort of unfortunate visual things because it's all on green screen because of COVID. But, once you put that aside, it was a pretty solid episode, I thought. I mean, we'll talk about it more another time, but it's pretty good, I thought. I was very happy with it. And what else? Well, we've got a little bit of show news, and it is a little bit sad because there's a reason that you're back, other than, it's always delightful to have you back.
Yes, it is.
It is absolutely delightful to have me back, says Beth. I am a delight. I am an absolute delight. Well, it's true. I can't really fault you for saying that. But our own beloved TV's Adam Clark has decided to step down from the podcast and step down from the network. It's not bad feelings or anything. He just moved back home to Newfoundland, as you may have heard from recent episodes, and was ready to have a fresh start on life. So we have a little message from him, which I guess we'll play right now.
La-da-dee-dee-dee, hoo-ah. Oh, hi. Sorry I won't be joining you, but this is my stop. From now on, if I live anywhere, it'll be in Megaphonic's back catalog as I'm leaving the network. In times like this, always remember what Voltaire said. Mind moving fast is crazy. Mind slow is saint. Mind stopped is God. Oh, wait, that wasn't Voltaire. That's from the Jack Shoulder film Alone in the Dark, starring, you guessed it, well, I always get those two confused. But yes, January marked my last appearance on this podcast as a regular co-host. It's just a show will continue, but it will have to do so without me. Goodbye.
So good luck, Adam, on your next adventures. You're always welcome back. And, this one's for you. He pointed out at one point to me that Joel had been on 109 episodes of MST3K before he set off. And, last episode was episode 109. So it seems weirdly fitting. Also, he managed to make it through all the Gamuaries, which is something that you didn't manage to do, Beth.
Nope. I KO'd on that pretty quickly. But yes, all the best to Adam. He left Ontario on a rocket ship full of hamdingers, and we wish him all the best.
We're going to figure out what's going to happen next for the podcast. It will, of course, keep going. Beth, you're going to be around for at least the next few episodes, and then we will see. Maybe it'll just be me talking into a mic by myself for an hour. That's exactly what everyone wants, right?
Or you could have a fun rotation of weird guests.
That's also true. That's also something people love in podcasts. We'll figure something out. But anyway, if anybody writes in and wants to say nice things to Adam about how much they appreciated what he's done for the show and how nice he was to your ears, send them along to us and we'll pass them along to Adam. And that would be very sweet. Well, I think we need to start talking about this episode.
I suppose at some point we have to.
10-4, highway mama. This time we watched Season 8, Episode 14, Riding with Death. Now, here we got one of those stories where a special government agent, in this case a really quite bland guy named Sam Casey, was trying to salvage a satellite that had sunk in the ocean when, ruh-roh, it exploded. Sam was left alive, but now he's invisible? Huh. Well, back at the lab where he works, which is named Intercept, they managed to stabilize his DNA, so now he has like a watch doohickey that allows him to be invisible for like 15 minutes a day or something, but if he does more than that, it's dangerous to his DNA. This all makes total sense, and you certainly do not need to repeat to yourself that it's only a movie. It's only a movie. Anywho, Dr. Arthur Hale has an exciting invention: super gas. Sam is tasked with transporting Dr. Hale in a discreet tractor-trailer, along with a sample of that super gas, to the feds down the road. But something's not right. One of his co-workers, Dr. Abby Lawrence, gets to Dr. Hale's lab a little early, and it turns out the whole thing is a sham. The super gas, in fact, quickly breaks down into something super explosive. Dr. Hale is trying to get the federal research money and then escape the country before they figure out it's all been a trick. Hale's co-conspirators grab Abby at the lab and basically smuggle him out of the truck and smuggle her in. Hale trails the truck by helicopter, waiting for the dangerous explosive to explode and take out our heroes. But after a series of close calls, often getting out of trouble with the help of another trucker Sam meets along the way named Buffalo Bill, Hale is caught. Yay! But wait, the movie's only like half over. Well, Sam is then sent up to Ontario to go after Robert Denby, who apparently has been connected to all sorts of bad news. Robert Denby is working in auto racing now, and Buffalo Bill now works for his pit crew. Oh, and also I guess now he's an amateur country singer. And he's got a girlfriend named Cupcake. Anyway, here's the grift this time. Denby has a dangerous element called deuterium, which he's planning to use to blow things up, sure. And I guess he's going to test it out on the race car, and Buffalo Bill is going to be the driver who's going to take the fall and die in the explosion. And Cupcake turns out to be working for Denby to make sure Buffalo Bill goes through with it. Anyway, Sam somehow figures all this out, and although Buffalo Bill initially doesn't want to believe him, eventually Sam manages to save the day. The end?
Meanwhile, in the Satellite of Love, in the prologue, Mike is a teppanyaki chef and shows off his chopping abilities, and cuts off Crow's hand in the process. In segment 1, the camping planet, where Pearl and co. are attempting to enjoy some R&R, it's under fire. Mike tries to rescue their tormentors by using a giant bomb made out of baking soda and vinegar. The resultant explosion destroys the entire planet, and Pearl punishes Mike by sending him the movie, Riding with Death. In segment 2, Tom plays the song The Funky 70s, inspired by the movie, but he seems to have misunderstood the premise, describing the events of Imperial Rome circa 80-70. And don't even get started about the 50s. Ooh boy. In segment 3, Tom, inspired by the cowboys of the highway in our movie, acquires a new, beautiful trucker body. Mike is disgusted by his flat butt. In segment 4, Crow becomes a new superhero, Turkey Volume Guessing Man. He can tell you how many turkeys it takes to fill up a space. It's a bit of an underwhelming superpower, honestly, but at least, unlike the hero of the movie, he can do it for more than 15 minutes a day. In the final segment, Pearl awards herself for her valor during wartime, while Bobo toots out a celebrational MIDI bugle number.
Hey, we're back in season 8, and I guess they're at war? So the last episode we did from season 8, which was the one before this, was Jack Frost, and I don't remember them being at war at the end of it, right? Like they'd returned the kids, and then they were going camping or something, and I don't know why we're in this situation now.
I mean, this is their first season in sci-fi, and there was a lot of adjustments to be made, and having a continuing story, I can see why they wanted that to work, but I just don't know if it ever works out. And as we're proving, even though we're watching it ostensibly in sequence, I mean, we're watching other MST3K episodes, but when we come to season 8, we're doing it one at a time. It's not working.
It's definitely weird. I mean, they're not going to have the sort of need for deep continuity like you might get with The Gauntlet or something, something nowadays where you might expect people to binge watch it. Although even there, MST3K just isn't quite that kind of show. But it's still the sort of like, oh, okay, I guess we're at war just because we're at war. Weird. The other thing is that we've got Mike blowing up another planet because that's one of the running gags in this season.
It is, yes.
So that's funny.
I mean, on paper it should be funny. I just don't, something's going off with the execution for me a little bit. Like, one of the things that I felt like never quite worked out is the way they retoggled the characters for the Sci-Fi Channel, and just the way that Mike has become a buffoon does not quite work for me, because it just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel balanced character-wise to have him just be the butt. The shapely one, not the flat one.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't invest enough in the joke to make it really pan out. I have no idea. It's weird. It's just this weird thing that they keep trying to make work, and it isn't working for me yet. But all that said, did you like this episode?
I did, and it's a good thing too, because this is actually, from what I can read from some of the feedback on Reddit and YouTube and other sites, this is a beloved episode. People really like this one.
I really like this one as well. I think it's one of my favorite season 8 episodes. It's not overdrawn at the memory bank, but it's really strong and pleasant. And this was my first time seeing it, and I ended up seeing it a few times. It was pretty nice. I generally enjoyed the riffing. It was exactly the kind of fake movie that I want to see on this show. In that it was, a 70s TV show that was a massive failure that they just pulled 2 episodes together and made it into a quote unquote movie for syndication purposes. Love it. Always love when that happens. And it's a weird TV show and movie with its person who can turn invisible a little bit, I guess. But that's not really the point of anything ever. Like, it's just sort of an excuse for the occasional unimpressive special effect and people pretending to get punched by invisible people.
Oh my God. The pantomime work was just so bad.
Yeah.
Did nobody ever take like first year drama where you learn how to like pour water into a glass invisibly? I was really disappointed.
It's really not good. And it doesn't cohere as a movie even by TV shows turned into movies standards. They try so hard.
Which are never coherent.
It's never coherent. But they go in and they overdub a few lines to make it seem like the 2 halves are connected, and it's really awkward. And the second half, they've got the woman, Dr. Abby, who had left the show by this point in the season.
Oh, okay.
By that episode, just sort of watching everything on a monitor, even though that makes no sense because are there camera people following? There's a very moving camera trained upon the action as if it were being made for a TV show. And she's just watching. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And it's pointless. And you just get to see her face and just going, oh, come on, Sam, you can do it every so often. It's nothing. It's just nothing. And it's great. I love it for this show. I think it's really good material for them to get to work with.
Yeah, that's the kind of level of movie I think they work their best at. And then also I think I just like the tone of this one. Like the tone of the riffing reminded me of the Mike era that I like best in the Comedy Central era, where it's like chill and detached, but it's not disdainful and superior,
Yeah, there was almost no racism going on. And
we'll ignore that first sketch a little bit, but
that first sketch was weird. Yeah, there's a few other moments, but it's fine. It's pretty calmed down. And yeah, it's generally, they're not just saying this movie sucks, which, is sort of the kiss of death for some of these episodes. No, it's perfectly good. It's a good riff. It's a good episode. I, recommend it. Thumbs up.
And the sketches weren't too bad either. Although I'm going to just point out that the whole baking soda and vinegar thing, very explosive. So nothing wrong with that. But it's so funny how, all my whole, adult life learning, where you have to clean things. The natural solution was always baking soda and vinegar, right?
Right.
Which I stopped taking chemistry in first year university when molar values kicked my ass. But I did remember, wait a minute, it's an acid and a base. When you put those together, you just get energy and then salt and water. So what exactly is the cleaning mechanism here? And just a few years ago, they're like, yeah, it's not very good at cleaning.
Oh, well. I could imagine both the energy sort of causing agitation on the thing and also the salt making a kind of abrasive to help clean. But I don't know.
But baking soda is already abrasive on its own. If that's what you're using it for, then you don't need to add vinegar. But anyway.
I feel like I've actually generally seen people say just use baking soda, but
yeah, exactly.
Except for cleaning drains where you do want it to bubble up, I guess. I don't know. It's never worked for me whenever I've tried that.
But I'm sure with enough baking soda and vinegar, you could blow up a planet. I'm sure that's solid science.
All right. Well, let's give it a try. So this is one of several MST3K episodes that we've looked at and will get to look at that are allegedly based on books by H.G. Wells.
Yeah, and H.G. Wells is my guy, so I was pretty excited about the opportunity to talk about this, but I had not taken the opportunity to read this book, and boy, does it not have anything to do with this movie at all, which makes me wonder if it was just they're trying not to get sued by Universal Studios, who I assumed owned the rights to it at the time because they had made a movie, The Invisible Man, in 1939. And it would still be under like copyright because copyright is like 75 years after the author dies, right?
Well, it wasn't then. Copyright has changed many times over the years, and it wasn't nearly as long at that point.
And I didn't realize H.G. Wells, he stuck around.
Yeah. I also didn't realize this until just recently. Even though I've read other H.G. Wells books for this podcast of ours, I did not realize he died in 1946.
Yeah. He just lived to see the atom bomb, which was one of the things that he always warned against, is this kind of escalation of powers. So not a great way to go, but at least he can be, well, I guess I was right. But yeah, so it's funny because you think of him as such a quintessentially Victorian author, but he made it well into the 20th century. Now, he wasn't writing for anything good by that point. I mean, he kind of flamed out early in terms of like his best stuff was when he was just getting started. But still, like...
Well, I haven't read any of his later work, I guess.
It's meh.
Okay. I have not read his 1938 book, Apropos of Dolores. Though I do love
that sounds like porn.
Name. Yeah, it does. So yeah, when we looked at Village of the Giants, we talked about how it's loosely based on the Food of the Gods. It isn't. And we've got, coming up this season, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come, which puts his name in the title, which is based on a book by Wells called The Shape of Things to Come. We'll see how closely it is. This was supposed to be loosely based on The Invisible Man. There's a guy who goes invisible. That's it. That's the only connection between the two properties. It's not even close. But it wasn't a good excuse to read The Invisible Man finally. And I have to say, I've read several H.G. Wells books. I generally have enjoyed them. I couldn't stand this one.
Well, what about it got your hackles up?
So the focal character, the Invisible Man himself, is just the most miserable and entitled man in existence. So for those of you who don't know, I guess spoilers for The Invisible Man, but here's the plot. The early parts are told in a flashback later in the book, but I'm going to do them first just so you get the sort of arc of the story. As a young man, Griffin, who will become invisible, we start off, he needed some money to fund his scientific research. He steals it from his father because that's what fathers are for. The father then commits suicide. Well, this is fine. He eventually figures out the invisibility thing by testing it out on a neighbor's cat. The cat or the neighbor, none of them consent. So that's great. The neighbor and his landlord start to get upset about him for the cat stuff and for just generally being a weirdo. And so he quickly makes himself invisible and decides it would be best for him to burn his landlord's house down. So great. He wanders around London stealing from a few shops. So that's always nice until he's got a ridiculous costume. And then we reach sort of where the book opens, where he goes into the small town of Iping and asserts his way into getting a room at the local pub where he's going to work on his science in the back room. He's an asshole to everybody there. He steals money from the town and tries to deny it. He tries to avoid paying for anything. Eventually, this sort of comes to a head. There's a big fight. He takes off his clothes to reveal that he's in fact invisible. Ooh. And then he rushes off, but realizes quickly, he left his scientific notes behind. So he bullies a homeless guy, as anyone would, who's named Marvel, to help him get his stuff back. And the villagers figure out that something's amok, so he ends up beating a bunch of them up. He and Marvel get out of town. He robs someone else, slides the money into Marvel's pockets. Marvel, who never wanted to be a part of any of this, runs off. And of course, Griffin has to chase him down and try to kill him. No luck. Eventually, he notices that he's near the house of an old friend from college named Kemp. He tells Kemp his whole backstory. That's the stuff I talked about first, all while making endless little petty demands and major threats on Kemp. And he tells Kemp not to alert the police, but Kemp had already done that, so oh well. This eventually leads to a chase, and finally Griffin is killed. And then there's a little epilogue where Marvel, the homeless guy, has settled down, and he's still got the papers, and he realizes that they're full of really neat ideas, and maybe one of these days he should try some of them out. There's nothing redeeming about the main character that you spend the whole book with. He's just unpleasant and awful to everyone around.
Yeah, what is interesting about Griffin, actually, is that he is awful from the start. When this was made into a movie, I think in 1939-ish, that featured a young Claude Rains. It's the idea that the process of turning invisible is what turned him into a horrible person. But what is actually the more interesting twist of the book, I thought, was that he's just bad from the very beginning. He's selfish, he's awful, he's a narcissist, he's, a sociopath. And that is, I found, is a running kind of theme in H.G. Wells's books, that just because you're smart at science does not make you a good person, because that was an easy collapse that happened in the Victorian England. Like, oh, we're scientifically brilliant, so we must have the moral upper hand, right?
Right.
So it's okay that we're doing all of these things. And he was always extreme. Like, one of the things I always liked about H.G. Wells is just very oddly for his time, he was very critical of the whole colonial enterprise. And he just did not believe any of the propaganda around it one bit. I mean, he did a little bit. Like, he still thought, like, oh yeah, I guess we are more advanced. So, but you're just taking things from them. You're not actually, and doing though, you're debasing yourself. So in a lot of, like, in my favorite H.G. Wells book, The Time Machine, like, that's kind of the running irony. Even though this is a brilliant man, he's actually like the most bloodthirsty person in this future world. Like, he is the invading monster, really.
Right.
So, here he's just doing it in a much less subtle way.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I'm getting at, I guess. I guess I should add before we get letters, 1933 is when the film is from.
1933.
That doesn't matter, but we'll get letters, so let's just put that at the pass. So yeah, when you say that about sort of the scientists that you shouldn't trust, the book of his that I immediately think of is Island of Dr. Moreau, right?
Exactly.
Where you've got the brilliant scientist who's doing this like horrible work, but there, like, you're that's not the focal character, right? The story is being told through another person who encounters and eventually gets horrified by what Moreau is doing. And, there are other people who are in other positions, and it does feel a bit more subtle and complicated, even though it's also very clear it's saying that Moreau is a monster. Here, it's just, let's just hang out with this asshole for the entire book.
Well, I think part of the reason is I wonder if this book was supposed to be funny, because it really is like he has a lot of fun just putting on different yokel personas and kind of getting into their like little worlds. And what's also striking about how it ends is the mob was right.
Yeah.
Right? The mindless mob was entirely right to hunt him down and kick him to death.
Basically.
Just bludgeoning him in the streets. That was the right thing to do.
It does. It does bring us into the perspective of like being part of the mob, which not a lot of books do, or not a lot of movies do. I don't know. I guess thinking of like Frankenstein, the movie, at least, where you're not really meant to sympathize with the mob. You might understand sort of why they're scared and why they're acting like they are, but you are not meant to want to be one of them. Whereas, rarely has a book made me want to kick its main character more.
Well, another thing I think why he's just so blatantly an evil character, like why he's a monster, is because he's a monster in a way that would be that resonated, I think, very specifically with the Victorian mindset, in that he is an assault on privacy and private spaces.
I see.
And in the Victorian England, like, that's, a man's home is your castle. It is the place where you have basically fences, well, not fences, but where you protect yourself from the world, where you have this kind of solidification of the private versus public space in a way that you never had in any previous era and haven't really had ever since. Like, they really went into the interior in a way that it's hard to imagine now. When I used to be a docent at a 19th century mansion, they're like, it's so dark in here. Why do they put so much lace in front of their windows? And it's just like, this was supposed to be a cave, This is supposed to be a womb.
I feel like I should be upfront for listeners who are saying, oh, Beth used to be a docent in a 19th century castle. Of course. That I used to be a docent in a 17th century home. So,
did you now?
Oh, yeah. That's another story for another day. But yes. It's interesting because I was wondering whether... I was thinking a lot about the entitlement that he feels. And he constantly insists that, of course you will agree to this. Of course you will do this for me because I am doing this for science and because I am the sort of person who deserves this kind of respect. I deserve to have that money. My scientific work is important and I need it. And there is that sense of, but of course, like it should be ours because I'm good and I'm the hero. Therefore, it should be mine.
Spoken like a true colonist, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, I sort of, obviously, like what he's doing is not per se colonialist, but it is the kind of logic that would justify wandering around the world and saying, oh, I'll have one of those and one of those, and this is mine, and it must be mine because I'm good. That's really reductive, but there is something sympathetic. Like it feels like he is a kind of burlesque of certain 19th century attitudes.
Yeah, and I agree that it's ham-fisted, but I think it's not trying to be subtle. It calls itself a grotesque romance, so it's Is
that the subtitle?
It is.
Oh, well, that is indeed what it is. It has nothing to do with this movie.
No, I mean, did they feel like they had to cover their legal butts, or were they actually trying to pull on, the reputation of H.G. Wells, or is it the case? Because the one thing about H.G. Wells is the reason he made such an impact is because he just had such original ideas. Like he literally was the first person to come up with a time machine, and that has become such a important concept for the modern imagination, right? So I feel like maybe that's what they're just like, oh, well, this is an idea that goes back to the great H.G. Wells, so maybe that's what it's more doing.
So I think that's a part of it, although maybe. The other thing is that, so the TV series that this was based on was called Gemini Man, no relation to the film Gemini Man that came out more recently. And Gemini Man was a replacement for a show that had ended called The Invisible Man from 1975, starring David McCallum, the guy from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Ducky on NCIS, who we've talked about in a previous episode. He figures out how to become invisible, and I did not read this, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page, but I guess there's a sense that it wasn't very stable, but nevertheless, there's a debate about whether this should be used for military purposes or not, and yada, yada, yada.
See, I figured this was like, what was that other 70s movie? Like you have the Lee Majors thing. What is that?
The $6 Million Man?
$6 Million Man. You have like
And the woman version.
Yes. And
Bionic woman.
Yes. Like that idea of like, or even Spider-Man, like the idea of, oh, you've had a weird scientific accident. Well, obviously what comes out of it, you must serve America with, like it's.
Yeah, exactly. Or Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen or all these other things. Absolutely. Yeah. It seems like it was part of that. It also seems like that TV show was very expensive. And so they made Gemini Man to make it cheaper by having him only occasionally go invisible and
15 minutes
have worse stuff. So I don't know. I don't know. But there is sort of a lineage to it that comes from something that is a little bit more close to The Invisible Man, but just not. So what did you think about our hero, Ben Murphy?
Handsome.
Really?
Affable.
Really?
Yeah, in a 70s kind of way. Yeah, I like the Lantern Jawed guys. I don't know.
All right. Definitely in a 70s kind of way. If you're you need to put on your 70s colored glasses to appreciate the good looks of Ben Murphy. I thought he was perfectly bland and boring in this. So I don't want to talk about him. I mean, we'll get another chance to talk about him when we do Being from Another Planet at some point, because he's in that as well. But I would rather talk about the actor who I thought did the best job in this episode. Unlikely enough, Jim Stafford.
Right. I mean, one of the things that really just whiplashes you about this movie is like in the first part, he's this very confident, almost cocky trucker named Buffalo Bill. And in the second part, he becomes this kind of like, how would I describe it? Like kind of wincing, doe-eyed, like naive kind of guy, like completely different energy, completely different place in the world. And it's just like, I did not know what was going on there. Like to have a complete character rewrite, it kind of reminded me of that one Simpsons episode about changing pilots where like they had like a really cool guy named Homer Simpson for the pilot, and they turned him into like a complete dolt who just like, SpaghettiOs, you know? Like that's the kind of character rewrite we're dealing with here.
Right. So he's playing Buffalo Bill, who is the trucker that helps him out the first time, and then later on he's moved up to Ontario and gotten a job in a race pit. And I guess just moving to Canada will do that to you.
So that really confused me for a while. It's like, why is this like Southern good old boy talking about Ontario so much?
It was a huge trend in the 70s to move to Ontario to start a racing career.
Turns out Ontario is in California. So.
Oh, yes. It's that Ontario. There is an Ontario in California. I guess that makes more sense than it being in Toronto. So, for whatever reason, I was a little surprised by this because he is playing this kind of stereotypical yokel character, I guess. And there's no reason why this comic relief character should be compelling. But he is. And like part of that is because he's surrounded by significantly worse actors. But part of it is also that he's not, I would argue, and hear me out, Buffalo Bill's character is meant to be comic relief and is not funny, nor is he played funny successfully. But he is still played compellingly.
Yeah. He's the one you're looking at when they're in a scene together. Like he does acting on the side. His main gig is he's a country singer, but he has better acting chops than anybody else in this movie.
Yeah, he's got charisma.
He has yeah, I guess that is the word for it, eh? Like, even when he's playing completely opposing characters, he still manages to be the one that you're looking at in the scene.
Because you don't want to look at Ben Murphy. He's not that attractive. Yeah, so he had a whole career as a country type singer. I don't know if you've heard any of Jim Stafford's music.
I listened to a bit of it. Interesting lyrics, very 70s in terms of like its focus and its like slightly comedic kind of tone. It's hard to say whether he's being a country singer ironically. It's got that kind of feel to it, you know, like it feels like more of a persona. I mean, one of his most famous songs is called Cow Plop, isn't it?
Cow Plop I did not encounter. Cow Patty is
Cow
what
Patty,
it's called.
sorry.
I did not hear Cow Patty. That is one of his later hits, let's say. His songs are kind of interesting. His first hit is called Swamp Witch from 1973, and it is very much a story song, the kind that only could become popular in the 70s, basically. And it's about a bayou witch who doesn't want to be found, and people who try to find her, and what happens to them, or it's kind of a mystery about what happens to them, but basically it disappears. And it's got sort of a kind of nice sludgy sound to it, and it did reasonably well. And his follow-up hit the next year was called Spiders and Snakes, which is a very silly song.
Yeah.
It was his biggest hit, but like it's about when he was a kid, there was a young girl who was hitting on him, and they sort of go out to the swamp, I guess. And she's like, I like you. And he like picks up a frog and says, here, have this. And she basically just rolls her eyes and is like, I'm not into you for spiders. I'm not into you for snakes. And that's not what I'm here for. Basically, let's and he's like, gosh. It's kind of charming. Also, just weird. Like, not a song that you think, oh yeah, I can see why this was a hit.
Well, you can, because in the 70s, I think there was a popularity for that kind of atmospheric, almost ballad-like music, you know?
Oh yeah,
like America, you know, that kind of feel.
Yeah, no, there definitely was some of that, but again, it's just not very like hooky.
No, it's definitely not hooky.
It's just kind of charming.
But nothing was hooky in the 70s. I mean, that's when you had prog rock.
Yeah, but prog rock wasn't popular. The hits around this, it wasn't bubblegum pop. That was the stuff that was really big then. There were definitely catchier tunes on the radio to compete with Spiders and Snakes. So he released a few albums, and he had a few minor hits, and then sort of less hits were going on. And then eventually he ended up having his own theater in Branson, Missouri. Just right next door to Yakov Smirnoff, I guess.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can you, Chris, as an American, explain to me Branson, Missouri?
I cannot. I have never been there, but it is kind of a place where you might go if you're in the Ozarks and you want to have a kind of Vegas experience and you want sort of that kind of music and comedy. If you want to see Andy Williams and Yakov Smirnoff and Jim Stafford and whoever else is there.
Okay, so I'm trying not to be too dismissive here. I get the sense that maybe what the commonality is among these men that we know, or the major people in Bronson, Missouri, is their songs are okay, but they must be quite charismatic people. Like, they must be just good to watch.
Yeah, I get the sense that they're kind of charming and mostly inoffensive, or offensive in acceptable ways, but it is very family friendly. Let's put it that way. But I've never been there, so I can't really speak to it. It honestly doesn't sound like anything I'd want to do, but I don't know. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to check it out someday.
Should also mention he did a couple very short songs for the Disney movie The Fox and the Hound from 1981, I believe, which is considered by many, the early 80s, to be the nadir of the Disney product, where they were putting out some of their worst stuff. The Fox and the Hound, actually, I don't think is too bad, but it's just, things were bleak. Disney had a very bleak outlook back then. So he does the lyrics and the composition for a couple of songs about how it's better to be a hunter than to actually make money.
Sure.
Things like that.
It sounds like his brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 short facts hastily spliced together about today's experiment, riding with death. Go, Beth, go!
Hey, you know Jean-Michel Basquiat? The artist who got very popular in the 80s, friend of Warhol, died young from a heroin overdose? Yeah, him. Anyway, one of his last paintings is called Riding with Death. It shows a guy riding a human skeleton that's on all fours. It has nothing to do with this movie, but it's a pretty neat painting, so we'll have a link in our show notes.
Alan Oppenheimer, who plays the first villain of the movie, Dr. Hale, would go on to more dignified acting work, such as providing voices for Skeletor and Vanity Smurf, as well as the Rockbiter from The Neverending Story.
Our other villain, Robert Denby, is played by Ed Nelson, the hunkier of the two Steves in Night of the Blood Beast. He also played Governor Nielsen in Police Academy 3, which I haven't seen, but I'm sure he does a good job and is very funny in it. My favorite Steve has a wide acting range.
Denby's dangerous element is deuterium. Now, deuterium isn't really a thing, but deuterium is. It's an isotope of hydrogen. Deuterium and tritium, another awesomely named hydrogen isotope, are needed in fusion reactors because their extra neutrons help feed the chain reaction. So, is deuterium explosive? No more than hydrogen is in its gaseous state, which, yeah, that's very explosive indeed. But not quite in the way this movie describes, of course.
Speaking of elements, in this episode we learn that crow is made out of molybdenum, a silvery gray metal that is used to impart superior strength to steel and other alloys at high temperature. But in Season 5's Lassie episode, The Painted Hills, Joel says that crow is made out of a high-density Kevlar. So, which is it, guys? Man, I really hope someone got fired for that colossal oversight.
The opening of this episode includes a few references to the mighty knish. And some of you sad souls out there might be asking, what's a knish? Well, it is a food that is deeply associated with New York City, but which has its origins in Ashkenazi Jewish cuisine. Basically, imagine a sort of Hot Pocket that fits perfectly in your hand, and the filling inside is typically mashed potatoes. It is carbalicious goodness, and oh boy, am I hungry now.
As Abby starts to emerge from the canvas sack she was stuck in, Crow says,
Christo started out with small projects like this.
Christo and his wife Jean-Claude were an artistic power couple known for large-scale public art projects, which often involved wrapping up large buildings in cloth, such as the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art or Paris's Pont Neuf Bridge.
But yeah, some of their earliest projects, such as their air packages, were smaller items wrapped in cloth. Furniture, weather research balloons, things like that. Oh, and by the way, here's a weird bonus fact. Christo and Jean-Claude were born on the exact same day, June 13th, 1935.
With a shot of Dr. Hale driving into the Intercept office, Tom says,
Gavin Mcleod mania. Not Gavin Mcleod, but an incredible simulation.
Gavin Mcleod, of course, played lovable old Murray on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, as well as Captain Stubig of The Love Boat. And do you know who once guest starred on The Love Boat? Jim Stafford.
The other half of that riff, the bit about the incredible simulation, refers to Beatlemania. Beatlemania was a Broadway musical that ran for a few years in the late 70s, whose tagline was not the Beatles, but an incredible simulation. In the show, a tribute band would run through the Beatles' career and, I guess, make some commentary on the tumultuous 60s or something. They made a movie out of it in 1981, and I saw it as a young Beatles-obsessed kid. Even then, I would have described the movie as inessential.
There's a lot of people who are called turkeys in this movie. Nope, this is not trucker lingo, nor is this meta-commentary about being in a bad movie. Turkey here is short for jive turkey, which, as you fellow kids know, means someone who is unreliable, makes exaggerations or empty promises, or who is otherwise dishonest.
As a plane flies by, Crow says,
Kelly Flynn on her way to another tryst.
So, Kelly Flynn was a B-52 pilot in the U.S. Air Force. She was, in fact, the first female B-52 pilot in the U.S. Air Force. But, yeah, that's not what she's most known for now. She's known for being discharged after having an affair with the husband of one of her subordinates.
The Air Force claimed that the real issue was that Kelly Flynn lied under oath, but critics claim that the Air Force went after Kelly Flynn much more aggressively than they typically went after men accused of similar infractions. Anyway, cool reference, dudes.
And that's time. Well, let's see. Let's do a little silly topic after all that. This movie is about a person who has this sort of superhero-type power of being invisible, which leads us to the perennial question. If you had to choose invisibility or flying.
I almost want you to answer first.
Okay, I will answer first. I'll be brave, and I'll say that flying has always seemed like there are a lot of unknowns. Specifically, if you fly, is it like being on a roller coaster? Is it like how upsetting to your inner ear is flying? Maybe it's fine. I mean, if it's just like walking, then that's pretty cool, I guess. If it's just like if it's easier than walking, even that's cool. But if it walking requires a bit of effort. I like walking. I'm not of all the physical activities that we could talk about, walking is one of the few that I won't poo-poo. But if flying is sort of like a magical levitation, you move around and it doesn't really affect your body in particular, then maybe. But I feel more comfortable saying invisibility would be easier on the tummy than flying.
What would you do with invisibility?
Not be seen, mostly. That's a good question. I don't know, because on the one hand, invisibility isn't all it's cracked up to be in some cases. And I'm assuming this is invisibility you can turn on and off. So you're not stuck like the H.G. Wells novel. But you maybe get more than 15 minutes, like in Writing with Death. So you can still be smelled, you can still be heard, you can still do other things. But what would I do if I could be invisible? I mean, I don't really want to go around thieving, I have to admit.
Or perving?
All right, here's the thing. When maybe you don't know this due to biological configuration. But for people of a certain anatomical configuration, sometimes you're walking and you just really need to pee, and you could duck behind a tree, but people still might see you, and I don't know, I get a little paranoid about that. If invisibility could cover all that up, I'd feel a lot better about just taking a whiz wherever I was walking that I needed to. I wouldn't do it in a rude or terrible way. I think I'd find a more sensible spot to do it than, I don't want to be a public nuisance with my invisibility, but yeah, that would be nice. That would be a nice thing.
One of the things that comes out of the Invisible Man is when his blood leaves its body, people can see it.
Yes.
So I wonder if they didn't get into urine, and when does urine not be a part of your body? And
well, if it's H.G. Wells rules, he's got to be, clothed, etc. His clothing doesn't go invisible, right?
Well, that's another reason why that it's such a funny book. Because he's running around nude all the time.
Oh, yeah, no, that part is really good. It never gets too specific, of course, but it is very funny that he's just walking around nude. But, but that also ties in with a sort of entitlement of it all. But anyway,
but it's also like, but it's again, a Victorian to be caught naked is just like unimaginable, so it's just like the fact that this guy was just tramping around in the buff naked is just like, that's how you knew he was a monster.
But yeah, it needs to be sort of more like today's movie where your clothing gets to be invisible as well. Otherwise, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in just being naked and invisible. That is, no, I'll fly. I'll take flying and just not use it if I don't like it.
The reason I guess we've brought up this binary is I don't know if it has any kind of history previous to this, but it's a very well-known episode of This American Life from back when they were just getting started, from February 23rd, 2001. And it's put together by a very young John Hodgman, who's interviewing people in New York about which one would you choose. And at first it just seems like, well, the pervs go for invisibility, right? Right. But it also gets kind of folded into this theory about like, are you a person who feels shame? Because if you're someone who feels very shameful or you feel like you have a lot to hide, then you kind of go towards invisibility. Whereas, if you are kind of an extroverted, kind of like heroic person, you pick flight, and just kind of getting very psychoanalysis about the whole thing, which I did not find the least bit convincing, frankly. Although something did come out of it, even though he wasn't doing this scientifically. Surprisingly, women are more likely to choose invisibility than men.
That makes sense, I guess. I don't know. You still haven't told us your answer.
Oh, well, this might just be my particular weirdness, but for me, it was unquestionable that I always choose flight. But that's because I regularly dream that I can fly.
Oh, yeah.
And it feels so natural and just so what I should be able to do in waking life that I'm just like, why can't I do this right now? And apparently, for some people, if you kind of end up on your back, then dreams of flight kind of follow your breathing pattern. So you kind of launch with your inhale breath and come back down with your exhale breath.
Huh.
That's basically what my flight looks like. They're more like big bounds than they are flights, but it's very much like I am getting a lot of air,
You say that, and that's making me think that I did used to occasionally dream that I would fly sort of around the hallways of my high school and things like that, kind of even after I'd left that high school. And, I don't know, I don't have records, but I know that I would occasionally fall asleep on my stomach back then. And maybe that was tied to it. I don't know.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with like shame or heroism. It's just like, in my dreamscape, it seems very natural.
Oh, sure, in your dreams. But in real life, like the one that you might pick, I mean, I don't know. I definitely am more ashamed than I am heroic. Fits with me.
Me too. This is just it.
Okay,
but it's just like,
enough.
I guess in my dreams also, they're usually positive dreams and they do feel very freeing. And like, I'm actually like literally, I'm escaping gravity. Like I some kind of shackle is being tossed aside.
Right.
And so they're enjoyable dreams. So I feel like that's kind of what I would want to return to if I could choose.
Give me teleportation. That's the one I want.
But if you do it with somebody else, you might turn into something together, like some sort of weird, what would be the name of a Chris and Basquiat combination?
Yes, me and my cat together. I mean, it would be an unstoppable force is what it would be.
Maybe it'd be the most beautiful thing ever.
Well, we have talked for quite a bit about Riding with Death. Before we head off into the sunset with Death in the booster seat in the back, is there anything you want to add about this episode for one final factoid?
No, I think I'll let it go.
Okay. Well, I have a thing that we might add, which is that you may not have noticed it because they're talking over it and it kind of happens really fast. But the theme song to this TV series or to this movie that they play at the beginning is really delightful.
Yes, it is.
It's really kicky. It's really fun. They make a few jokes along the lines of 70s inspirational corporate speech, but frankly, it's real good. And little surprise because it's by Henry Mancini.
The horn playing guy from King of the Hill?
What are you talking about?
Oh no, that's Chuck Mangione.
Oh,
Never mind.
yes. No, not Chuck Mangione. No, Henry Mancini, the guy who wrote Moon River and a bunch of other classic Hollywood songs.
Okay.
He did a bunch of TV work as well. And I guess this is a kind of microscope. I feel like we may have talked about him before because this is not the only MST3K movie that he had his thumb on, whether he knew it or not, because he's one of those composers that other studios sometimes just, took that music from one movie and plopped it onto something else. But yeah, it's really kicking. We'll have a link in the show notes where you can hear it clearly. But it's a lot of fun, and I encourage everybody to check it out and bop along to it.
It's one of the highlights, and this is, I feel like, when we're feeling, the lack of Adam the most, because I'm sure he would have had a lot of amazing things to tell us about Henry Mancini. But in the meantime, check out those show notes. It's a really fun tune.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've come up with a better trucker name for Beth, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at @itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. The show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And we'd like to do a special shout out to our latest patron, Stephen. Thank you very much for helping us do this little show together. If you want to follow up on anything that we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/110. Well, how was that? You back in the saddle?
Oh, it's like I never left, Chris.
Oh dear, I hope you felt more rested than that.
Well, what are we watching next?
Yeah, you willing to do it another time?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I think we gotta do season 13, episode 1, Santo in the Treasure of Dracula.
Wait, didn't he already do the Dracula women?
What?
Yeah, Santo does Dracula women. Wasn't that the first one they did with Santo? There's just a lot of Draculas. I guess you got to move on to the head Dracula.
Samson versus the Vampire Women was the name of season 6, episode 24, which, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that one as well. Who knows? I liked it. I'm going to tell you right now, it was very good. And we'll figure out a way for you to be able to hear it without the sound problems. Those of you who were Kickstarter backers, if you missed the live show, you can watch a repeat of it. And soon it'll be ready for anybody who has a subscription. So that'll be exciting. But until then...
My trucker name is Molly B. Denham.
And treat yourself to a knish today. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Goodbye.